Alright guys, today I did want to discuss the completely embarrassing and disastrous Brisbane Olympic Stadium situation. We know Brisbane is hosting the 2032 Olympic Games, and the stadium situation in terms of the main venue for the athletics and the opening and closing ceremonies is getting beyond a joke. Now they are on track to embarrass the city of Brisbane and Australia in front of the whole world. Brisbane was awarded the 2032 Games back in 2021. Now, there was no real competition in terms of serious bids from other cities, so Brisbane sort of got the Olympics by default. And when you think about it, it is sort of a weird choice for an Olympic host city, not particularly well known on the international stage. And when you compare it to recent hosts like Tokyo, Paris, and Los Angeles, who will host the next edition of the Games, it is sort of a strange choice. Now, in terms of the stadium plan, the original plan was to renovate the Gabba to host the opening and closing ceremonies as well as the athletics competition. And it would be a total knockdown and rebuild, with a new stadium with a capacity of 50,000 to be built on the same site, as well as a pedestrian plaza for fans to sort of congregate outside of the ground. You would have some live sites, some big screens, etc. And the bill came out at $2.7 billion. Now, this would be the most expensive stadium ever built in Australia, even when you factor in the surrounding infrastructure. We do know Optus Stadium in Perth, currently the most expensive stadium ever built in Australia at $1.8 billion, including the surrounding infrastructure. And the total $2.7 billion would be paid by the Queensland state government. And because of the cost blowouts due to inflation and other things coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of discontent from the tax-paying public and members of the government about the cost of the whole Olympic Games program and the infrastructure. And we know Victoria pulled out of hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games in late 2023, and this Gabba rebuild started to lose support. And at that point in time, the government and the Premier Stephen Miles in Queensland ordered an independent review of the whole Olympics plan. And that report was finalised in early 2024. And they said, it's not worth doing the Gabba. You should build a $3.4 billion stadium with 60 to 80,000 seats in Victoria Park, which is a parkland sort of area about 3 kilometres north of the city. And you can see here from the renderings, it is sort of a nice parkland setting, lots of greenery. There would be some nice views of Mount Cootha and the city in the background. But of course, with the bill coming out even higher than the Gabba, the state government ignored the same report that they had commissioned and said, no, it's too expensive. We're not doing that, or the Gabba. Instead, we'll renovate Suncorp Stadium, Lang Park, the rugby and rugby league stadium to host the ceremonies. And we'll also put in $1.6 billion into the Queensland Sport and Athletics Centre, also known as QSAC. But this wouldn't be a full-time stadium. It'd only be a temporary stadium, and it would be converted back to a capacity of just 14,000 after the Olympics. And if you don't know much about the city of Brisbane, this QSAC is located around 12 kilometres south of the city, and it is completely obsolete in its current configuration and design. It was built for the 1982 Commonwealth Games, so it's over 40 years old, so you do understand it's not going to have all the modern amenities. But seriously, it looks like something out of a third world country, completely ugly and falling apart. And you could sort of argue, well, if it was going to cost $1.6 billion to build a new oval stadium that could host the Brisbane Lions and also international cricket going forward, you could maybe make an argument for it. But the stadium for the Olympics is going to be made up of temporary seating. So it'll be a total white elephant after the Olympics. And why would you spend $1.6 billion on a temporary stadium? You may as well build the new oval stadium with all the modern amenities and design features to last the next 50 years. And the Gabba is already terrible and obsolete. And international cricket and the Brisbane Lions in the AFL thought they were getting a new Gabba completely rebuilt up to modern specs. And even if they decided to go down to the Victoria Park option, at least they could relocate there, but they're not going to be playing in a 14,000 seat stadium way out of the city. It's completely crazy. And it raises the question, where are the AFL and cricket going to be playing on a long-term basis? And even Suncorp Stadium / Lang Park for the ceremonies, by that point the stadium wouldn't have received a major renovation for 30 years. So it's really at that point past its use by date in terms of needing a little bit of a refresh. And they have talked about updating that stadium, but there's no renderings or designs at this point. But the whole situation is just completely embarrassing, not only for Brisbane, but also for Australia. You're representing the city and the country on the world stage, and you're going to be hosting the Olympic Games in rinky-dink renovated temporary stadiums. It's completely embarrassing and completely shameful. Now, there could be a twist in the tale because there is a Queensland state election scheduled for October of this year, and the opposition Liberal Party is up big in the polls, and they are expected to win and form government at this point. We know Queensland, a very conservative state, so it is somewhat unusual that Labor would be in for any extended period of time. But at this stage, the Liberal Party has come out and said they're not backing the Victoria Park proposal. So the question is, could they pivot once they win the election and say, look, it's completely embarrassing to renovate a completely obsolete White Elephant Stadium at the QSAC. We're going to build this stadium. I know it's expensive. It's not going to be popular, but at least it will be around for the next 50 years. And you could make the argument, the Olympics is a total waste of money. We need to be building hospitals, schools, transport, infrastructure. People are homeless. We do have a cost of living crisis in this country. But if you're going to bid for it, you may as well do it properly. Build modern infrastructure that's up to standard and not do it half-assed in front of the world. It's completely ridiculous. And at least with the Gabba rebuild or the Victoria Park Stadium, you would have a use for it going forward. It just doesn't make sense to spend effectively $1.6 billion on a temporary stadium. That is all we're going to have time for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.